As a teen influencer, the question I get asked the most is always, how did your journey start at such a young age? Well, it actually wasn't some kind of carefully crafted master plans years in the making, but instead, it all began with one single video. And this is the screenshot of the video that I'm mentioning about. It was about me receiving a surprise birthday cake from my delegate friends during a Model United Nations conference, while also winning Best Delegate Award on my birthday. So, what a coincidence and happy moment. I decided to capture it and post it online just to reserve my personal happy memory. But then the next morning when I woke up and checked my phone, I dropped it in shock. 10,000 likes. Then the number doubled and even tripled, and eventually reached 70,000 likes, 500,000 views, and 400 comments. Such a short, simple, and successful story to kick off the speech, right? But what I seldom tell people is that at first, for every 20 of these comments, one was actually a hate comment. Comments like, I've never heard of something called Model United Nations before. It's definitely one of those useless events where rich kids go and attend. Or, I wish I was also a rich study abroad student and attending fancy activities all day. I don't even have to worry about my Gaokao, which is Chinese University application test anymore. So yeah, my 15-year-old first birthday gift was a surprise gift, my friends. My second was also a surprise by hundreds of strangers that I never met before. The difference? One made me cry in tears of joy, and one made me cry in a panic. I try to explain myself, saying that Model United Nations is actually an academically rigorous event that could boost one's college applications. But they replied with more confusion and mockery. I tried to delete these comments, but I couldn't delete them from a 15-year-old girl's mind. So they keep on echoing like ghostly whispers surrounding my sleep. Now I'd like to ask you, in my real-life anecdote, who is the villain of the story? You're probably thinking, well, it's definitely those ones who posted these hate comments, isn't it? But what if I tell you that that's not the answer I'm sharing today, but instead, the information cocoon? The information cocoon, proposed by American scholar Cass Sunstein, refers to the phenomenon where people become so confined into homogeneous information and viewpoints due to personal preferences and nowadays, algorithmic influences. On an individual level, since our brains are more likely to accept simple, straightforward information that aligns with our existing values, we find ourselves extremely comfortable within these little information cocoons, where we could resist accepting opposing viewpoints, we could avoid cognitive conflict, and however, our attitude towards the world outside of our cocoons become just simply indifferent and numb. Now, on a societal level, which many may neglect, this leads to social polarization. Algorithms segregate us into totally different groups, where we reconfirm our biases over and over again by watching the information fed just for us by the platforms. And cross-group dialogue is just simply lost. Harmonious negotiations and discoveries on public issues become nearly impossible. If you take a closer look at my case, there is a wide information gap between international students studying abroad and also domestic school students in China. While for us, many of us are aware of Model United Nations and how it could benefit our college application. But then for a lot of Chinese students, Model United Nations isn't a part of their academic career because it wouldn't benefit their college application at all, which is totally normal because since we're in different education systems, there will definitely be an information gap inside. But the problem here is, because precisely in these information gaps, that's where information cocoons were formed. And platforms and algorithms come and leak in and segregate us into totally different groups. And that's how stereotypes were arise. And behind these stereotypes lies a butterfly effect. Here's how I'm going to explain the butterfly effect. On a small scale, it's just individuals like me receiving those biased and hateful comments online. But if you look at the bigger picture, according to statistics from China Youth Daily, 40% of the study abroad students reported that they received skepticism, exclusion, or discrimination after they returned back to China, their homeland, due to their overseas studying background. And this is not the only stereotype that widens the gap between individuals, groups, and ideas. Nor it is the only stereotype that deprives people from the opportunity to be truly seen and heard. And because of that, most of the times, outside of our information cocoons, there's only silence. Then what should we do? I suggest how we should ask the question, what's the opposite of numb? And I found empathy. I love this word. Let's take a moment to appreciate it. Empathy. I believe that the sense idea or the spirit behind empathy is actually daring. Because empathy is about daring to fight against our initial instinct to choose numbness. It's about daring to challenge your own viewpoints long fostered in your mind. It's about daring to force yourself to step out of your little cozy little cocoons and see the cruel yet true world out there. And also, I believe we are in an era where empathy, in a lot of cases, are no longer something that naturally arises as an instinct due to our trend of numbness and indifference. This is why I suggest we should start consciously practicing empathy. How should we practice empathy? Today, I'm going to share my method, which I call it the CARE method. And we are going to achieve empathy through CARE. Step 1, conversation. Instead of just using your platforms to send one-directional, superficial comments to others in their comment sections, try to engage in long dialogues instead. Also, in an age of such fragmented attention, just willing to spend the time and energy to conduct a real conversation already shows great care and empathy. Apart from that, always acknowledge that there is an existing information cocoon, not only in others, but in ourselves as well. After listening to my speech, I hope what you see out there in the future is no longer one biased individual after another, or the opposing side, or the people with the wrong perspective, but instead understand that it is all of the media exposure, social interactions, and environments that we are in that shaped our perspectives. The same applies to ourselves as well. And then, resonance naturally flows in. Now, resonance doesn't necessarily mean that we always have to fight to get one single standardized answer, because in most cases, there's no such. But however, resonance means that there should be this flow of the emotion of kindness, empathy, and care throughout our entire conversation. And that is how we get empathy through care. And now I'm going to use my personal story. Still, let's go back to my story as an influencer to demonstrate the CARE method. Remember the story about me starting this Retinal account and then that accidentally got viral? Well, I mentioned to use that kind of platform to help me pave my way to further carry on and try to implement something different. I started this so-called English chatting groups on my Retinal account, where I encourage people to join and practice English together by sending English text and English voice messages. Well, however, my little secret is that I was also trying to use it as a platform to create a space where the foreign users, which there were a lot on Rednote, and the domestic users in China could find a place where they could conduct meaningful and in-depth communication together. And that was my vision. And also, about the group rules, it was simple. No hate comments, no discriminatory texts, no curse words, of course. And also, lastly, always try to reply to others with full sentences instead of just sending single words and emojis. And always ask others and respond so that the communication could keep on going. The results turned out amazing. We realized that what started as very small daily sharing topics, such as how much homework load we have or what time does our school holiday start, could gradually evolve and become some kind of in-depth conversation about, for example, the education system differences between two white nations. And we realized that it is through these insightful conversations where resonance was found and empathy grew, and even expanded rapidly. At its peak, we have formed 12 online English chatting groups with 500 members for each group. And I have to say, at first, it was extremely difficult for myself to maintain all of these groups at the same time. But then surprisingly, a lot of volunteers came up and said that they are willing to help me monitor these groups 24/7 in turn. And they were usually teenagers at my age, users from different parts of the world. And together, hand in hand, we created this harmonious, grand, cross-region, global community where everybody is delving in deep conversations, sharing about our daily lives and also diverse environments. And these group members and volunteers became my inspiration to start a nonprofit organization called Global Teens Unite, where we provide a cross-regional platform for youth to strike up in-depth conversation on global topics. When we successfully hosted a 3-hour grand virtual summit on US-China youth education differences last year, where topics like Model United Nations, education system differences were once again brought up on the table, but then in a more open and empathetic dialogue, I felt this sudden feeling of overwhelmed with gratitude. Not only to my supporters all along the way, these volunteers from different parts of the world, but also to this 15-year-old girl who chose to believe in the power of empathy over hatred. She founded her mission, a mission she is committed from then and now on, spreading the awareness and importance of daring to be empathetic in our nowadays world. That is exactly why today I'm standing here on the TEDx stage, because I know this little red spot is one of the only few rare spaces where people in the world who used to be covering their ears and rushing forward are willing to stop, and we pause, we care, we resonate, and we empathize. And I'm here to urge you just to simply take this kind of caring spirit out of the room too, to always dare to be empathetic. For the last few minutes of my speech, I have some words to say, especially for the youth in this room, which I know there are a lot of you sitting down here right now. As the time goes on, let me just remind you that the issue of information cocoon will only become more pressing and critical. And that's why there's something I especially want to say. I remember when I first started my nonprofit organization, a lot of people questioned my choice, asking, why teenagers? Aren't they the ones being most overwhelmed by digital distractions and shrinking attention spans? Well, the truth is, yes, we might be an anxious generation being harmed by social media a lot, but adolescence is actually a critical period for social cognitive development. Researchers show that during this time, our brain region, who is responsible for understanding and empathy, which is also called the temporal junction, are rapidly developing. Teenagers are actually not just passive consumers or phone addiction people, but we have the potential to be the most empathetic generation yet, if only we dare to be. And daring to be empathetic doesn't necessarily have to start with us teenagers or grand initiatives. In fact, I would like to encourage you to now look to your left and right to your families and friends at this very moment. And I encourage you to start spreading empathy in these intimate circles instead. Because even with these people's the closest relationships around us, invisible walls of misunderstanding is always continuously growing. Let's say the conflicts between parents and children, the rising tensions between genders, or the conflicts between ideologies. If you listen carefully, you can hear these gaps cracking beneath the surface, making empathy more necessary than ever before. So empathy begins with each and every one of us together. Now, pessimists say that we're in a world where individualism is a trend, and that it is inevitable that all human beings will becoming more numb and more indifferent and more divided and extreme than ever before. But I am here to encourage you to be an optimist, to always have faith and understand that empathy was and will always be the greatest part of human nature. It is in every single one of us. All we have to do is dare to step out of our information cocoons and dare to be empathetic. And empathy is the last weapon that us human beings hold to fight against the cold algorithms. It is the light that peers through the dark cocoon walls. Only if we dare to care, only if we dare to be empathetic. Thank you.